All right, we're live. Everybody, welcome back to the PEO Speedwagon podcast. I'm Rick Johnson with President Ryan Shapiro here of PEOMG. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Super excited to do this second episode. I didn't believe that there would be a second episode after the first, but so thrilled to be here. This is a lot of
I
fun.
We can honestly say we're back by popular demand. I mean, we did
hmm
have some excitement on that first one. So
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that I was most interested to ask you was how are you dealing with all the fame that you've encountered after the first episode? Like, what countermeasures have you put in place? How have you adjusted, and like, just what has that done to you?
yeah, it's changed a lot actually. I mean, luckily it's 6 degrees outside, so I think that keeps the paparazzi at bay. But
Yeah,
overall, no major life changes except my follower count has shot up drastically.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, when anything doubles from 1 to 2, it's a big growth. So the update on the tree. That's why it's still here. It's too cold to take it out. It might as well stay. So those who I there was a lot of feedback on the comment and the message boards about the tree, and so it made it to its second episode.
You bring up a good point. Please stop emailing us about the tree.
Yes,
We
yeah,
we're overridden with comments about the Christmas tree in our inbox. Please, we need to get back to work.
it's a top rule, and I will answer to put it all to bed. It's real.
It's a real tree. That was the most asked question.
It was by far.
Perfect. Well, awesome. Today we're kind of just talking. As people know, I'm learning about the industry. Ryan's been in the PEO industry for a while, so it's every episode is going to be a bit of an educational series for myself and asking Ryan questions, and things come up throughout the day, and we say, hey, that's great. Let's talk about that a little bit in the podcast. One thing that we wanted to touch on was kind of just relevant to the time of year right now, which is we're just kicking off in January. Ryan, you'd mentioned that this is
hmm
probably the first time that first round of payrolls going out for folks that have engaged with a PEO or some type of HR outsourcing. Maybe speak a little bit to why that first round of payroll is important and what people are maybe feeling now that they've engaged with a PEO around this time.
Yeah, it's exciting. A first pay date is kind of a culmination of a lot of work on multiple parties. So if you look at it from the vantage point real quickly of the PEO and the sales rep and the implementation team, they put a lot of work through a sales process and all the marketing, up to that point to create this new customer that's going to leverage their services to manage all these aspects of their HR model. And the implementation team that did the work, and then ultimately that first pay date is the big true beginning of the relationship. So it's really cool from that end. On the customer side, it's also the byproduct of a lot of work, because while the onboardings and implementation processes of PEOs can be really excellent, like there is work that has to be done by the customer, and there is a delicate touch they take to it, because all the information to make sure it gets set up the right way with the support of the PEO is going to touch their employees. And so that first pay date's kind of that little bit of like a limbo moment. Like, did this actually work? The
Yeah.
good news is PEOs have put in a lot of firewalls to create zero defect first payrolls and have that happen. But that is the culmination of their decision. And now you are fully on the chassis of the PEO and processing the payroll, and the benefits are turned on. You're starting to perhaps access some of the early services of the PEO model that you selected itself. And so that's a cool thing. And so it's kind of
Yeah.
one moment that happens probably more than any other time of the year on, January 15th, 14th, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, people are running around. It's happening. The money is hitting the bank accounts. It's the
Mhm.
first, also, I think, test for the PEO. I mean, a lot of it before that, it sounds like it's meetings and understanding the services that are being offered from the PEO, and there's plenty of them. And for the first time, the employees are experiencing that, maybe even replacing what they had before for the first time.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit. What are ways that can go well? What are ways it can go wrong? What's a good first kind of payroll cycle look like and feel like for a company?
Yeah. This is probably one of the questions I get asked the most. Is just about the onboarding, because it's kind of the biggest unknown, right? When you go through an evaluation with a PEO, you're going to see their marketing materials, you're going to see customer testimonials, you're going to see the service model, explain the benefits selected, and then the onboarding, which is really, really critical. kind of, it's not that it's under communicated, it's just what kind of comes after all that decision and evaluation occurs. And I find that the best PEOs do two things. One, they throw the most resources at it. And two, they set the best expectations around it. So
Mm.
on the resources standpoint, they have onboarding teams and they have payroll specialists and they have people who this is all they do. They don't work with established PEO clients that have been with their respective PEO for years. They only work with customers who are going through this particular phase, and they do it over and over and over again. And as such, they gather all the knowledge and they find all the potholes in the process so that they can help that customer go through it in the best way possible. And two, the best expectation, or the other thing is the expectation setting. Like if you set good expectations for what an onboarding can be, which is a really great PR event for your company, because it's the opportunity for your employees to see that what you've invested and made a decision about for your company that directly impacts them and is often for them. Two, it allows them to just start to access all the different tools and resources that are going to come through it and understand when they can do that. But three, it lets them know that it is a little tactical. Like you got to fill out a bunch of spreadsheets and you got to upload employees and you got to do I-9s again. And when you set the expectation with a customer that these are the things that will have to happen, they're not caught off guard, right?
Mm.
They're not surprised at the amount of work that could be done. And if that's done and done right, then your customer will have a good experience. Unfortunately, the flip side of it is that it's not always set with the most resources, or it's not always done with the best expectations outlined. In my years of talking to customers who've gone through PEO processes, or just the experiences that they've had, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors. There was a lot of, hey, this is not going to be a big deal. It's just, a few hours worth of work.
Yeah.
And that's just not accurate. It's not accurate. And it's kind of disingenuous to the employer because they're willing to make this decision to do this. And as such, they're willing to do the work because they think it's right. But then when they're undersold on what the requirement will be to do this, it leaves a really bad taste in the mouth, which is a nagging negative event at the beginning of the relationship that is really hard to recover from. Not only for that particular PEO, but for PEOs at large. And so that's where a lot of really kind of negativity comes out of what should be a really positive part of the process.
Yeah, and one thing we talk about a lot is there's more and more employees that are working from home, and then also physically in the office. You're talking about hands-on help, people helping with onboarding and implementing. You're saying some of the best PEOs or PEO brokers are even helping with the virtual side of things and having some kind of webinar or something to walk them through the process. How are they helping with kind of that virtual version too?
Yeah, every PEO's got a little bit of their own process, which is fine because, it's unique to them. It aligns to their service model, the way their technology is delivered, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's about the data collection at the front end, making that real easy to access for the employer so they don't have to dig through rounds and rounds of reports and, just one more thing, type scenario.
Yeah.
And, two, they have scheduled calls, and the PEO really controls the process to help the customer know when and where to be and what needs to be done in between. And that's not only from uploading all the information, but showing them how the technology works, showing them how the payroll is going to work. I find a lot of times when the whole process is not laid out, it is very disconcerting to a business owner because they're learning about the technology and then they're being told other things will come. Well, let's not forget they have a business to run. They have other things they need to do. So they really like a well laid out plan of like when and where they're going to understand every part of the model, from employee onboarding to first payroll processing to time and attendance tracking. When is a PTO policy going to be set up within the system? So when they're really good about explaining all that and showing them when it's going to happen, that I think puts the customer at ease. And there are PEOs that do that really well. And, unfortunately, there's some that don't. And that can create a lot of discomfort, as I mentioned. But it's really what I find is when you get handheld through the process, and you can do that when the PEO applies a certain resources and lay out a clear strategy as to how it's going to work, it's going to go better.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And you're saying it's added stress on the owner, who everyone at that time during this significant change is looking at, to kind of lead them through. And
Mm-hmm.
so taking that pressure off them, that just kind of goes down to the employees as well. And I imagine with these significant changes, if you're not sort of celebrating the change, then it can be viewed in a negative light. You kind of need to make sure everyone's on board with it and celebrating it in some way, because it does improve the overall function of the company, but also the individuals and the employees' lives as well.
Big time. Yeah. And one of those is setting good expectations for that decision maker, like I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And what I find is always best is to tell them that, hey, you've got some things that we're going to tackle here right away, whether they're strategic HR opportunities that you've outlined you want to improve in the business, whether it's specific scenarios around the organizational structure, or whether it's getting a time and attendance system tied up into your, your accounting system, right?
Mm.
What is I found is always best is say, hey, we are going to tackle all these things as quickly as humanly possible. But the thing we need to put the most energy and resources towards first is getting that first payroll run correctly and getting your employees into their insurance programs. Because nothing will, make a whole relationship go sideways if that doesn't go well. Because your employees will be looking at you. And when the payroll doesn't process correctly or the benefits get screwed up at the onset, they're going to go look at you and go like, what are you doing? Like this is impacts us directly. And so all these other strategic things you want to do don't get a whole lot of support from your employees because you kind of messed up the first thing. So it's really key to set that expectation with the owner that this is what we're going to put all our focus on, and you'll thank us for it, because when we get that right and done at a zero defect environment, then that opens up the door to do all these other things, and they'll believe in the decision you made for them.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention too, it's an emotional and kind of a sensitive thing. They're handing you a business that they've been running themselves and been ingrained in, and then they're kind of saying some of these core functions, we're asking for some help with, or maybe they're moving from one relationship to another with a PEO or outsourced HR, and then they're expecting a higher level of service, and then next thing you know, that first 2 weeks is really the litmus test for, is this going to be better? Is it going to be as good or better than I was running it before? So yeah, to make sure you actually see the results with that is huge. With with onboarding in general, we know like payroll needs to go well, and you're saying also the insurance needs to go well.
Mm-hmm.
So does anything else in that first few weeks. But what else could you say adds to an effective onboarding period? What are some things owners can do to make sure that it goes well, or that their brokers can do to help them make sure it goes well?
Yeah. It's a few things. One, it's communicate to the employees what is going on. Right. It's now 2024. The PEO industry has been around for 50 years. 15, 20 years ago, employers were still a little bit unsure about co-employment and what to communicate to their employees because they thought it was going to be scary for them.
Yeah.
And we can certainly empathize with that feeling. I get why they felt that way. I saw business leaders and people think like, hey, we're just going to kind of underplay this co-employment piece. It's not a big deal. They're not going to care. And I don't want them to be kind of scared off by this. And I think that's while the intent was good, it was poor in its execution because the employee needs to know, like they need to know, one, they're going to have an employment agreement with this company, one that is secondary to the business owner's employment agreement with them.
Mm.
But two, they need to understand all the significant value that comes through that relationship and how it's helping the company, how it's creating operational efficiency, how it's streamlining the administrative side of the business, how it's bringing in this big company benefits, and really kind of play up like, hey, this is the thing that makes this whole thing work, and it's really great. And as such, because I trust you, Mr. or Mrs. Employee, like you should know. So I think that's one thing. Two, have them be a part of the onboarding meetings. I know in the work world, like, hey, it's really hard to get 50 different employees in schedule, like, and try and get them into these employee orientations or onboarding meetings or whatever they call them. But it's so key. That's where they learn about all the great benefits. That's where they learn about the organization. That's where they learn how to sign up for the payroll and get all their information loaded in and align to the 401k if they want to sign up for the first time or migrate their existing 401k over. Like that's where they get all their information. And so in a remote work environment, we're going to have Zooms and PEOs are going to do it that way. But the more and more you can have people in office to do them and then couple those with Zooms where necessary, I think that's really key because just communication becomes clear. And then third is get them to understand the key dates and the things that they should do. A big one is like the worst thing, and I know it's a busy time of the year at the end of the year, but this is the case anywhere. Like if you've got a prescription you got to get filled, like get it filled on the old plan, because on the cutoff day, on the effective date of the new PEO relationship, it's going to take a day or two for you to get your medical ID card, right? So your insurance card. And therefore, like if you have to fill a prescription one day after, you might not be fully loaded up in the system. And that's not a fault of anybody. That's just kind of the way of the world. So communicating these inflection points in the process where, hey, if you could do this before, that would be ideal. Like it will make your life easier. Otherwise, if you wait till after, totally fine. However, it just may not be as clean for the first, few days or so. So just things like that a business owner and business leaders who are keen to the process and the decision that was ultimately made, like help get that knowledge out there, help disseminate that to the employees so that they know how to operate, and then they don't have disruptions in the things that are important to them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's actually rarely do I get to talk about my PEO experience from years ago, but I remember we signed up with a PEO at an old job I was at, and I missed the implementation, like the onboarding of everything. And I never went back. I never had a recording. I never learned how to operate it. And I just kind of thought of it now as you're saying that from the employee experience where they maybe didn't have the additional hands-on that, I probably needed, or send me the video or the WebEx afterwards to watch. And I was kind of out of the loop. I didn't know I even had an HSA, and it was a few things I kind of missed out on early on because I skipped the implementation.
Yeah. There's just a lot of information, and being there firsthand is so great. And there's sometimes you can't avoid it. So the PEOs do a good job recording and stuff, this information. Yeah. But the more you can drive people to that, they're going to also feel the excitement of the other people in the room when they see like, oh, wow, our benefits just got better. My cost went down. Like what's coming out of my paycheck is less than it was before. And so there's also some buzz around these decisions. And that first time that they're introduced to the impact of the decision that you made, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner, is in that onboarding meeting.
Yeah, I think everybody remembers the first time they could actually have all of their benefits like on a mobile app on their phone. That was kind of a weird one for me.
That's cool.
Pulling up all my statements and everything.
It's the first place you can learn. You can get like 2-for-1 things from Culver's, right? Like it's the ice cream cones, or you can get free movie tickets. So all the funny stuff that the PEOs talk about that are great little perks for certain. You learn about those things there, and you get to hear the anecdotes too.
Oh yeah, no, those are terrific. Awesome. Well, very great. As we're talking about onboarding and just kind of getting everybody set up, is there anything, I guess, from PEOMG standpoint, we're obviously consulting companies on the potential PEO that might be the right fit for them. How do folks like us, how does PEOMG fit into this picture of helping people make that transition, and how do we help with onboarding essentially?
We just simplify it and put our customer at ease. We've done it many, many times. And for me, that now represents, hundreds and hundreds of times, maybe over 500. So I mentioned potholes earlier. Like I know where the potholes are. PEOMG knows where the potholes are because we're doing it at large scale and we can anticipate. And it's kind of like if I'm sitting shotgun with you during that onboarding process, and I know that there's a pothole up about half a mile, like I'm going to tell you get in the left lane because we're going to scoot past it and everything's going to be fine. And this is how we avoid it. And so it's really just that knowledge and insight. And then also somebody looking on the horizon to identify some of the work, some of the things that will need to be done, and setting those good expectations. So, your new customer can anticipate what they need to do to have the most effective onboarding. And it's, so I think that that's one of the things that, anybody can do. We do exceptionally well here because we know how critical that effective onboarding is to the client journey, just starting off as well as it possibly can with a PEO. And so we put resources and CX and processes in place to do that.
Yeah. And like you said, that whole thing starts with communicating and setting the right expectations all the way up into the beginning, because you're going to have everything come to fruition through that first week and payrolls hitting. And so that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrific. Well, guys, this has been a great second episode. Thanks for listening in to the PEO Speedwagon podcast. Next week, we'll see if Ryan still has his tree up or not. Maybe we'll try to incorporate more swag into the episode. As you can see, we have it here. We'll just be constantly covered in merch. But yeah, check us out, guys. We'll be on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you can get a podcast, and YouTube as well. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Awesome. Yep. Episode 2 in the books. Thanks, Rick.
See you, Ryan.
See ya.